Productive Pastor 106, Pastoring During a Disaster. Welcome back to Productive Pastor. Friends, Chad Brooks. It's a place where we talk about healthy ministry through strategic productivity. And this episode is an archived episode. It occurred way back in the day, I think in 2017, in the first iteration of this show. And this is why I'm bringing it back. I live in Louisiana. In Louisiana, we have to deal with named storms. It's the beginning of hurricane season. We also have all sorts of interesting weather events. And as we're coming off Memorial Day weekend, I'm still seeing newsfeed stuff from the storms in Dallas and the way this is happening. And I have found in my ministry, especially where I live, that disasters are a thing that happens, especially national disasters, weather disasters, but this can mean all sorts of other things. And I wanted to go back into the archives to pull out this episode of a good friend of mine, Reverend Donnie Wilkinson. We had this conversation after both of our churches experienced massive flooding in 2016. And it was about the ways that pastors led through these disasters and the ways that we can keep our head above the chaos of what is happening, but also lead well. It's a different sort of an episode, but it's a fantastic conversation. I'm glad to bring it back into the thread. And so we're just going to jump straight into the talk I had with Donnie. Now, remember, this is an older episode, so you might hear me refer back to things as being in the show notes that are actually not in the show notes. But you can find the current show notes at revchadbrooks.com/PPP/106. So let's just go straight into this conversation with my friend Donnie, who has lived and led through a disaster in the last year. I mean, y'all kind of are popping up on 1 year.
Yeah, we're almost exactly a year from the Baton Rouge floods, August 12th, 2016.
Yeah.
Was the days the river started rising.
Yeah. And Donnie had called me just about 4 or 5 months before that in March of 2016 when we were flooding, and just offered sage wisdom from someone I respect a lot. But we're going to have a conversation today about pastoring during a disaster, and not a disaster like your choir director gets in a fist fight with the financial secretary, but pastoring during natural disasters. And it's something that's really important. And with Hurricane Harvey having just come through Southwest Louisiana and Texas, we want to offer our own experience because we have been there before inside of this, but just kind of have a conversation. So, Donnie, what do you think is the kind of quick rundown of pastoring during a disaster?
The very most important thing to realize is that this is bigger than you can handle. This disaster that has come into your community, into the state, is more than you can do. It's more than you and 5 of your best friends can do. It's more than the conference itself might be able to handle. But it is not too big for the body of Christ. Chad, what's the tagline of Foundry up there in Sterlington?
Jesus is big enough.
Jesus is big enough. Keep that in the top of your mind, and you'll be all right. But if you think it's up to you, up to just me as the pastor, to grunt through this and save everybody, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt.
You're going to get ragged out quick.
Absolutely.
I think with Monroe, I spent 5 days in the water when Monroe's happening, and by that 5th day, it was very, very apparent where I was.
Absolutely. Looking back, not just my own experience, but experience of others here in the Baton Rouge area, based on your natural constitution, your fitness, everything, you have within you 5 to 15 days that you can gut it out.
Yeah.
And then you're not going to be worth a flip.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah. And you have all along, and this is a piece that I've had to remind myself even today, just dealing with Harvey over the last week. You still have a church to run.
You do.
And you have staff to be responsible for. As we always joke, Sunday's coming.
And Sunday is coming. Charge conference is coming. January review is coming. SPRC meetings are coming. Stewardship is coming. Everything is still coming.
Yeah. So while this might completely like grab your own personal schedule and your priority list, like by the neck and throw it around for a few days, it's still coming. Donnie,
Absolutely.
did y'all, when the waters hit to Baton Rouge last year, what day of the week was that?
That was on a Saturday. We canceled church on the Sunday because the waters were riding. And then we were 2 days before we got back into the office.
Yeah.
So we got into the office on Wednesday. And the very first thing that we did was those staff members and key leaders who could make it here, we sat down and we spent some time in prayer saying, God, what do you want to do through us?
Yeah.
And we began to sketch out a plan. It was nothing was carved in stone. But we knew right off the top we wanted to get in touch with everyone who was connected with Broadmoor. And so that went up on the to-do board. We knew we wanted to begin to help facilitate the conference response by becoming a distribution point for flood buckets and other relief items. We knew we wanted to begin to collect stories and give people a word of hope and encouragement in there. And we knew we wanted to identify leaders in the community and in the church and empower them, give them real authority to make decisions on areas of responsibility. I wanted to focus on those things that only I could do.
Yeah.
And get everything else that not only I could do onto somebody else's plate. People want to help. They just need some direction.
Yeah. When we hit... So Donnie has actually served in Sterlington before, so he knows my mission field very well. Like when we had the water hit, what we're lucky enough is to have hundreds of rednecks with duck boats who are just ready to roll when something like this happens. So we spent 5 days in the water. I was lucky at that point in time. We had Allison Sauls, who was serving up here with us, who's down in Lafayette, and she flooded like 2 months after she moved. From Sterlington to Lafayette. So she was running a lot of the triage and stuff because we talk about what can you do. Well, I've got a bunch of redneck toys, and we've got the people on board. And just through my background with scouting and other stuff, I was in the water, but the whole time cell phone was in a gallon Ziploc bag in the front of my waders, and we were interfacing back because we had folks in the church who were able to serve like as switchboards. And like I had somebody for a couple of days with me in the boat that their job was to hold my phone.
Yeah.
And they were literally, when they needed something, hey, Chad, what about this? Da, da, da. And empowering people to make decisions. And that sounds silly because like today I was at lunch. I went by to grab something for some folks who are raising money for us for Harvey right now. And one of them said, like, you need an assistant when this kind of stuff happens. And I was like, I really do, just during this kind of stuff. Because I miss so many messages, and you know what that's like. But it's just you. What can you do? And you know what you're naturally inclined to do. You know what you have the abilities, the skill set, and the resources to do. Like it was easy for me. I've got 3 boats, like John boats and drag boats for duck hunting and that kind of stuff. So it was just for me, it was obvious. Load everything up in the truck, drive 1.5 miles to where a good portion of my church lives, and it's under 4 feet of water, and let's start resourcing and moving. And
absolutely.
So you figure out what can you do. And Donnie, we'll talk more about what you can do and what Donnie did during the Baton Rouge flooding, because he found his sweet spot inside of that too. But we're at 4 things we're going to talk about. We're talking about stresses during a disaster. We're going to talk about self-care in a disaster. We're going to talk about leadership during a disaster, and then leveraging influence during a disaster. So Donnie, what are the major stressors you think of during a disaster?
The major stress is seeing your people hurting, your people that are on your church, that are on your staff, who are, and as pastors, we love people, and so many of us hurt when our people hurt. And then a sense of wondering, how are we going to care for all of this?
Yeah.
There are obviously financial stressors that you're going to deal with.
Yeah.
It has taken us almost a year to get back to the financial place where we were hoping to be prior to the flooding.
Yeah.
Know this ahead of time. There's going to be a dip. People who were impacted in the flooding, there's going to be a dip in their generosity and their ability to give immediately. It'll tick up, and then you'll see, and when they get into the last 6 to 8 weeks of finally moving back into their house, they'll disappear from church. They're not mad.
Yeah, they're taking care of life.
taking care of life stuff.
Yeah.
There is physical stressors that you need to be aware of. You need to be mindful of your body. You got to stay hydrated. You got to stay eating good. I messed up in this in a major way last year. I gained close to 25, 30 pounds over the course of the 6 months following the flood, primarily from eating General Tso's chicken every day.
Dude, hey, okay. I had some of Broadmoor's disaster jambalaya about a week after that flood.
Yeah.
Did Operation Barbecue Relief come to Baton Rouge?
Well, not barbecue, but we did have, Cajuns can cook. So it was coming out all over. We finally had to say, Cajun people, stop cooking.
No more sauce piquant. We had Operation Barbecue set up in Monroe. So for like 2 weeks, I had brisket sandwich like 3 times a day because I could just slide through and they it's the preacher. And they'd like throw it into the window of my truck. You take care of yourself. I mean, physically, I think they also get stressed out because you want to do more.
Absolutely.
And I had to learn, I had that person in that boat with me managing my phone because I knew that I could get more done if I was not having to talk about the phone and I could help. So I was not even necessarily doing that much out there, but I was leveraging influence out in the water, which we're going to come back to later on. But it was important for me to be out there, and we were helping. We had access to stuff, and I mean, I'm a 300-pound redneck that can lift a lot of weight. There were some times that you had to get out there and get the work done, but I was always stressing with, man, we need to do this, and this, instead of honing in and focusing, okay, this is the most immediate need that we need to be meeting right now, and it's all right to just meet this one need.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act between what is the thing that is happening right in front of me, and is it the best use of your time, your talent, your ability to go out and muck a house, or is it to organize 100 people to go out and muck 100 houses?
Yes, exactly.
And between those two, it is so satisfying to go in and physically carry stuff out of the house. It feels good. It doesn't necessarily feel as good when your knuckles aren't all busted up, but you've been organizing the labor. But it's the necessary task of leadership in these times of crisis.
Yeah. And that's what once the water started going down for us, I shifted into that role and learned some new roles, and then I just kind of get to have fun when I get to go help somebody else out, and that's when I get to bust my knuckles and chainsaw pews. Yeah,
part of the role as a pastor is you are representing God. It is a time when it'll be most clear that you are doing the representational role of God. You are not God, but you are representing everything that the church, everything that the incarnational aspect of our faith represents in your person. And the best use might be to go and spend 10 minutes at 15 work sites, driving around the town, being a circuit rider and touching base people and appreciating them and encouraging them and loving on them, but then keep going to the next place.
Yeah, pop in, pop out. And that's so that stress. There's so much stress, and then that actually leads to this next conversation piece is self-care during a disaster. And we've talked about that at the front end with the eating, but man, I'll tell you how important it was to sleep.
Absolutely.
I mean, sleep. The older we get, the more we realize that sleep is just this quotient that drives so many things.
Absolutely. To give yourself a bedtime. The first week and a half after the flood, I was gone by 6:30 in the morning. 6:30 in the morning. Wouldn't be back until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It takes an hour to wind down and everything. And I was not getting enough sleep. I finally, because I just crashed, I gave myself a bedtime. I would go and be lights out by 9:30. And even if my body was awake, I would stay in the bed until 6 o'clock the next morning. I was not going to give myself an excuse to get up and be busy as opposed to resting in God and recharging the energy in that way.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that I've said this before on the podcast that crashing is not the same as resting.
No.
And I'll tell you, for me, what was pretty powerful is one night during the flood, I remember coming back down a street. And actually, we were on a golf course. The golf course had flooded. There was about 5 feet of water, and you could run outboard motors wide open through the golf course. And I remember us coming through at dusk one day with some friends, and we were all quiet, we were exhausted. You know that point where you just don't want to talk anymore?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there, and we were waiting on somebody else to call back. And I remember I just popped open my phone. I popped into the YouVersion app and did a little of that. Or like I learned earlier, just a few months after the flood, we had a good friend of mine who's a police officer get killed in the line of duty. I was hit by a drunk driver here in Monroe. And I'll tell you, that week between the accident and the funeral, I defended my morning devotion time like it was the most important thing, because it was that I was like, if I don't have this calming sensibility, I will not be able to handle the next 12 hours. And I wish that besides my little YouVersion thing that happened one day in the boat, I wish that I would have remembered that and clung as tightly to that during our last situation, because that's that centering piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Your productivity in the time of a disaster will be the product of your prayer life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Productivity will be the product of your prayer life. It's the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. One of the Luther's quotes that I love is, "I have so much to do today, I must spend 3 hours in prayer." It is the most, that time that you spend with the Lord every morning and every evening is something that it is not wasted time. It is what is going to give you the capacity to truly be the presence of Christ for people. And I can't be Christ for somebody when I'm exhausted and mad and angry and all this. So I need to connect with God and have my spirit filled up so that I'm serving out of the overflow. And what I discovered was the old Ignatian practice of examine.
Yeah.
It was one of the most beneficial spiritual practices for me those 2 months after the flood, sitting down and reviewing the day in the light and love of God. What were the consolations? What were the desolations? What were the high points? What were the low points? And God began to give me eyes to see things in a new way through that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we have to have the strongest thing that we need during any stressful time, but especially disaster, is we need to be healthy emotionally.
Absolutely.
And if we drain ourselves and we don't sleep, we're not going to get that. If we're not eating right or well, if we're not drinking, I'll tell you what, Donnie, I can say this in Productive Pastor because it's my podcast. In Monroe, when it flooded, every single mailbox either had a case of water or a case of Miller Lite.
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you need to drink your water.
That's
and
it.
Just all that, like all those things, like our physical needs and our emotion, our spiritual needs, they all coalesce together. And this is any day of the week, no matter what's going on in that season of life. But in that disaster, when you become drained in more than one cylinder, it's a recipe for absolute disaster. And your congregation and your community needs you.
They do.
During that time.
People are going to be coming on Sunday for a word from the Lord that will provide sustenance for the weary, that will speak to people who are going through the absolute worst thing they have ever experienced in their life. And you need a fresh word from God. This is not a time for bringing out the tropes, bringing out the cliches.
Yeah.
And give yourself permission to be vulnerable in front of your people.
Yeah. Be real.
Confess your own confusion. Confess your own anger about the situation. Confess your own sense of helplessness. But always make that turn like the Psalms do. Yet I trust in the Lord.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I know God is going to bring us through there.
Yeah. And so it's just and that kind of leads us to this third piece, is just leadership during a disaster, is that we, no matter what our passions are, we have a role to play that our folks are expecting out of us inside of this. So, like, what does leadership look like outside? I mean, inside of this just special, unique situation and circumstance, what does pastoral leadership look like? And maybe even, I know both me and you are not like this, but for a lot of these listeners, they're introverts, and they are not necessarily the folks that really have a desire to stand up on an oil drum and be barking orders or be sitting down and running massive systems that have to absolutely be implemented yesterday because disasters move fast.
In your church, in your community, there are people who are excellent at systems. There are people who are excellent at logistics. There are people who are excellent at communications. Your job as the leader is to identify them and get the hell out of their way.
Yep.
You provide clear boundaries, expectations about what things you get a few things that you give them as much authority as possible. You push as much of it down the command structure as you can. And if you're uncomfortable empowering people, that you just got to get over, baby. You got to trust.
Do it.
Indeed, God has given you people in your church to do the stuff that you can't do.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, you hear we jokingly see the memes where it says you have one job.
Yeah.
But like this is that time and season where, you might be great at nursing home visits. You need to be a networker right now.
Absolutely.
Because people are looking to you for it. And this might be also the time when folks that you would never have a chance to form a relationship with or to see or anything outside of this disaster are going to be dropped into your lap.
Absolutely. In our time last year, we found a couple who were retired computer scientists. They from scratch built us a program to help manage our disaster recovery program.
Wow.
Where they customized it for us. I'd been at the church for 2 months. I had no clue that this resource was there.
Yeah.
That is there, and it's being shared with others now because of that. That's just something they said, hey, we think we could do this. We were working off of some Post-it notes on the wall.
Yeah.
And they took that thing and put it into a digital form that could be used. There are more resources in your church than you've ever imagined.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our job is to identify the gifts and to release them for the sake of the kingdom. There's a part to play, I want to say, about the public pastoral role. Yes, you are the pastor to your congregation, and you have special responsibility for certain sheep in your city, but also you have the opportunity to be a public pastor. After the chaos of the Alton Sterling shooting and the murder of the police officers in Baton Rouge, the flood happened 3 weeks after that. During that time, in response to people in the community asking, where are the pastors, I'd started wearing a clergy collar. I had done that before when I was in Thibodeau, because it's such a heavily Catholic community. It's the only way I could get into the ERs just about, into the emergency rooms. But I had more people stop me while I was in the store, while I was at the gas station, asking if they could share what's going on in their life, looking for an opportunity to be a representation of the incarnation of Christ. And if you're comfortable wearing clericals, it's a great way to let people in your community know who you are. It's a way of broadcasting the faith without being all preachy at them. It's just saying, I'm here for you.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that people are like all the money that we've raised in the last 72 hours for Harvey, hardly any of it has come. Like, we've had church folks who have been very gracious and generous, but above that, the majority of this money has been coming from people that are outside of our church, that are just, that people have no problem with a public pastor in the middle of a disaster. And
Absolutely.
This is the chance that you have, because in my experience, a lot of folks have just bad juju over pastors. And in the Deep South, a lot of folks who are de-churched, their issue is not, they don't have an issue with Jesus. They have baggage, typically from a really bad preacher or a pastor and a janky church situation. So the disasters are the time for the church and for you as a leader to just completely fix those issues, and you'd be blown away what happens afterwards. Now, this is something, now both of us, I think this is one of our sweet spots in disaster, and both of us realize the way that we can leverage this, but let's just talk about leveraging influence during a disaster. I mean, you had not been in Baton Rouge long at all, and Broadmoor, y'all blew it up online. Yeah.
Well, we one of the things that was unique about the Baton Rouge flood, as opposed to Harvey, was that everybody knew Harvey was coming. The Baton Rouge flood happened, and there was no national media happening. And so through the beauty of social media, began just capturing those little stories, those little vignettes. You have a worldwide distribution network in your pocket. And you have the platform through Facebook or Instagram or others to where you can capture a picture, capture a story, and then put that in a way that people can share with that. We use that, those stories. At first, we just wanted to get the word out to help raise awareness of what was happening in the community. And then once we got more systems online, as we were able for people to begin to help with us, begin incorporating giving opportunities for people that all went back into the flood relief there. And so people respond to stories. They want to see what Jesus is doing in the life of the single mom with the baby on her hip, that all they've got are the diapers that she would carry the baby out of the crib with. But able to capture that story and to share it. Both the people who are the survivors of the disaster, but then also those who were not impacted directly by having their homes flooded or by suffering any personal loss, but who are being the hands and feet of Christ by reaching out and serving. There, I remember we had a little girl, Abby, 5, 6 years old. She came one day. She spent 4 hours with us helping to distribute flood buckets. She was wearing a Wonder Woman T-shirt, and I think that's perfect.
Oh, I remember that.
Superhero.
Yeah.
Being a superhero right there, and finding ways of sharing those stories. It helps lift everyone's spirit, and it's not about you as the pastor. It's about what God is doing through your community of faith, what Christ is doing through this expression of His body on whatever corner your church happens to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you just realize that there's the native power. And part of this, honestly, is making the decisions of when are you going to be personal and when are you going to be public? So when are you going to be turning this stuff loose on your personal channels? When are you going to be turning this loose and taking advantage of the church's channels and understand the web of that?
Absolutely.
Like I learned, like during our flood, the Monroe flood it's kind of a forgotten disaster, and it never really got any traction anywhere. And a lot of Ouachita Parish, especially my ministry areas, are unincorporated parts of the parish. And so the only folks we had was the sheriff's department who could come. Well, They were spread so thin across the place, we realized that we were just having to get a lot of stuff out. But then also with Harvey, what we realized was, since Foundry had built up this reputation between our flood and then Baton Rouge, just the amount of we had huge social traction over raising those fans to bring down to y'all.
Yeah.
We're like, you know what, this is a natural thing for us to do together. And so this experiment of keeping it in my own personal page while simultaneously on the church's page and leveraging that. But we also realized is that the power of leveraging relationships is when you have other local business owners that are willing to cooperate with you and work alongside of you for that. Like my belly right now is stuffed from some hurricane gumbo that sold out 300 plates in 25 minutes today. And the profits from that are going into flood relief, and we're part of that and helping out with that, and those sorts of things. Is just not to realize that people, especially those outside of the church, are dying for trustworthy places to get involved inside of this, and we need to be telling them the most trustworthy place to serve as the local church. And also the fact that in a disaster, the local church is one of the best organizations because we have the ability to mobilize faster than anybody else can in a safe manner and secure, which you were a huge example of that in Baton Rouge.
Yeah. There are ways to leverage those stories. And part of it has to do with keeping your awareness of what's going on and looking for opportunities. One of the posts that got the most traction was we found a flood bucket that had the name of a church from Kansas.
Yeah.
That had some little church. I looked them up. It's a little less than 100 people in worship church had made a flood bucket. That flood bucket had made its way to Baton Rouge. We took it out to one of our staff members' homes, and my first question to her said, "Do you want to be Facebook famous? Because we're going to shoot a little video where we're going to thank this church in Kansas for being Christ to us in the midst of this disaster."
Yeah.
Giving them props thanking them publicly, and then sharing that, and then allowing the larger connectional resources to pick those up and replay them as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, this is the time for you to just leverage so much that people desperately want and need. For Foundry, one of the verses that we've just been leaning heavily into the last couple of years is Jeremiah 29:7. Pray for the peace and the prosperity of where I've sent you. And as clergy and as pastors and as ministry leaders, this is a time for us to raise up that banner of shalom peace. In the middle of disaster and heartache and heartbreak, we can provide peace and calm. So
Absolutely.
Well, Donnie, thanks so much for coming on.
It's my great pleasure. I hope this is the last time that this will happen. But it looks like some things are happening in the world. Systems are changing, and we need all of our pastors, all of our clergy, to up their game. And the gospel, your people deserve more. The gospel demands more of us to go out and to be the body of Christ and to be the leaders that Christ has called us to be.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, I hope you're having a great week, and I probably will see you in South Louisiana sometime soon.
Now, this is an important conversation, and I hope you learn from it. It's a different conversation than we normally have in the podcast, but I feel like it is really good things for us to think about, because the likelihood that you might have to deal with one of these issues during ministry, I believe, is pretty strong, just depending on where you live. But I hope you enjoyed this content. We'll be back next episode with regular, productive pastor information. But until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of the community. And as always, it was a pleasure to be with you.